The All Black podcast is powered by our official cloud software partner, SAP, helping our teams in black become the best run teams in sport. To listen to this episode and all the All Black podcasts, subscribe on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere you get your podcasts. This is the All Blacks podcast.
Kia ora whanau, welcome to episode 14 of the All Black podcast powered by SAP. Ben O'Keefe back in the studio today, our second podcast of many that looks at the game from behind the whistle. Hopefully we'll give our listeners a better understanding of some of the rules, big moments in the game that cause a huge amount of the discussion. Welcome back, Benny. How you going, mate?
Kia ora, Andy. Kia ora, everyone. Yeah, I'm good. Really good. Exciting to be back on the show. Thanks for having me.
Mate, I appreciate it. Before we get into it, mate, some of the things we want to discuss. What's been going on lately? I saw a little bit on the All Black social media, some of your social media, a bit of a capping ceremony for some of our refs. How was that?
Yeah, mate, it was a pretty special day. I think we might have mentioned it last time we were chatting that New Zealand Rugby were going to recognise all their New Zealand Test referees, and there are about 80 odd that have done Test matches around the world, either refereeing New Zealand or refereeing other countries overseas, and being recognised with a cap. So we all turned up at Eden Park. We had the actual referees that were there. We also had friends and family of those referees too turned up, and we got a cap, and it had our sort of first Test match on it, and we were able to just share memories, and it was like just a big reunion. So I was sort of sitting in back in a little bit of awe with some of the referees that were there. We had Keith Lawrence, Colin Hawke, Steve Walsh, and even met the grandchildren of some of the older referees that couldn't be there at that time, which was pretty special because they turned up and they had their big blazer on with the big silver fern. I think it had 1950. That's when they did their first Test match, and then I worked out that their first Test matches back in the day. Mine was Samoa, Georgia, in Samoa, and then but back then their first Test matches, the ones that they did were, I think one of them was New Zealand versus the British and Irish Lions. So
oh my God,
it's a hell of a debut.
Yeah, mate, awesome. And I suppose with rugby teams and rugby players, they get that community feel. They're with those guys all the time. They have that real culture of being in a team. But like for you, you're absolutely in a team. And I know on a match day, a team of 4 refereeing the matches, but you probably don't get to spend a huge amount of time together as a collective, do you? Like I know you probably for the modern refs, you have times at the start of the season when you get together, you have testing, all those sort of things. But to get the wider refereeing community together is pretty cool. And I'd say, they've got a few war stories, whether it be the Lawrences or the Paddy O'Briens and those sort of guys. They've probably seen a few sights.
I definitely heard a lot of how they refereed rugby better back in their day.
Yeah, of course.
On the day, but it was special because you're right. Like we sort of travel around in 2s, 3s, and 4s. So we're in a very small team. So on that day, we're able to all come together as one large team. Share memories because we've all had experiences with each other. Either as I was coming through as an assistant referee, as men like Jonathan White and Bryce Lawrence were refereeing, Chris Pollock. Yeah. But also, just to be recognised by New Zealand Rugby and brought into that New Zealand Rugby community that the sacrifices that some of the families and the referees have previously made was well recognised. So it was special. It still gives me a good buzz, and I think the cap that I have, I'll cherish that for a long time.
Mate, it's cool because I know, players have a lot of milestones that they try and hit, debuts, certain amount of games, getting to major tournaments. I'm sure it's the same for you, but it's cool, isn't it, to have that recognition and maybe there's more to do there, whether it be for New Zealand Rugby or at an international level, blazers for certain amount of games or certain amount of games or milestones or tournaments. I think it's a good thing, isn't it, because it really creates some opportunities during your career to target a few things and hit a few things and have those moments where you sit back and actually look at what you've done, because I see you as a pretty young referee, but actually you've been around a wee while, and you've probably ticked a few boxes and maybe don't necessarily get the opportunity to sit back and look at that sometimes.
Yeah, we're really proud when we go overseas. Often we don't really get to referee the All Blacks. We don't get to wear the silver fern. But we'll wear our World Rugby gear, wear our Super Rugby gear, NPC. But we're proud to be a referee from New Zealand. So I know that on my whistle I've got a little silver fern. I know some people in their skins that they wear under their comms gear, they've got a bit of a silver fern there too. So we're hugely proud to be able to do that. I think every single referee, and we do try and reach milestones, but often the ones that you don't really recognise until they happen because it can be pretty fickle. You referee a game, you try and do your best for 80 minutes, and then sometimes it doesn't go well. So some people can get to 1 or 2 games, some people can get to 50, or even this November window, a referee like Wayne Barnes is going to do 100 test matches. So
Wow.
it's a pretty broad spectrum, but just to be involved, I think every referee, especially within New Zealand, we're just absolutely stoked. So yeah, it's a special day, special just to catch up with everyone. And I think the tradition is going to continue now. So every time a new New Zealand referee comes along, they do their first test match, they're going to be able to receive one of those caps alongside the players too. So great tradition that's starting in New Zealand rugby. So I look forward to being one of those old referees in about 50 years, and I can turn up and say that, we referee way better back in our day too.
It's just a rite of passage, isn't it, Ben? It's just what you get to say when you're an old, experienced person. That's just the way it is.
Yeah, experience is the right thing to say. So just keep the young ones on their toes.
Women's World Cup at the moment. Our women's game is up in highlights. Fantastic start to the tournament last week. Full house at Eden Park. It wasn't just a game of rugby or a series of games of rugby. It was an entertainment. It was a festival. It was an awesome thing to sit back and watch and be a part of. For our female referees as well, a little bit of opportunity at the moment as well. You want to talk a little bit more about that, Ben?
Yeah, last weekend when I watched that game at Eden Park, I got chills, when the women did, the haka and just the whole game. It was pretty exciting and pretty awesome to see New Zealanders get behind it and fill Eden Park for those games. So we've got a pretty exciting few weeks coming up. But even more exciting is what New Zealand Rugby is doing is that they're really encouraging ex-women players to be involved in the game and referee. So you might get there's a bit of a pathway there. So they're endorsing this. They've created a scholarship to be able to help. If you're an ex-player, whether you're at international level, you played for the Black Ferns, or you've played rugby within New Zealand. What New Zealand Rugby's done is they've created a scholarship to encourage to get more women to referee after they sort of hang up their boots. There's a bit of a pathway there now, and we've seen that. We've seen at the Rugby World Cup now, we've got 2 representatives. We've got Maggie Colga-Orr, we've got Lauren Jenner as well. So they're refereeing some of the biggest games in the world. And I think the reason we want to get ex-players in is because what I traditionally knew, so I sort of came through a refereeing background. So, you learn the laws, and then over time, it takes a long time to actually learn, to feel and the understanding for the game. What I think ex-players don't realise, and we've had that with the likes of Glenn Jackson and Jamie Nut-Brown, is that you can quickly ascend the refereeing ranks because you had that feel for the game. You actually understand, what teams are trying to achieve. And that's the biggest thing that slows you down as a referee, is actually getting that feel. So you can learn the laws pretty well. And, I think we've had really good success stories with Salika Winiarda's refereeing right now, Rebecca Marnie, Tiana Nawati, and Nikki Inwood. So all ex-Black Ferns that have, either starting their professional career as referees or have had a really, exceptional one now. So I just encourage, especially the Black Ferns now, go win us that World Cup. And then if you're thinking about, hanging up your boots, well, keep your boots. We'll give you a whistle, and New Zealand Rugby will support, any ex-player woman to start refereeing. So I think it's a really, really good initiative that they're doing. And I think, as we see on the stage right now, it's a really good career after playing rugby if you still want to stay involved in the game.
Mate, absolutely. It's best said in the house, isn't it? I think that's what something I've heard you say, Jacko, say, a heap of refs that I talk to, no matter what the experience, you're out in the middle, you're mixing it up, which is pretty cool. And to sort of, let's talk a little bit about that, best seat in the house. You've done a few games this year, mate. Any stick out as ones that you look back on, really memorable for any particular reason? You've done some pretty big ones this year. Yeah,
look, it's been this year's a big year for rugby. The year before a World Cup's always pretty massive, right from provincial, so NBC. So I've done a lot of awesome games there last few weeks. They've been all down to the wire. I've got a semi-final this weekend, and then a few weeks ago I did the Rugby Championship game, which was Australia versus South Africa at their new stadium in Sydney, and that was half rugby match, half boxing match. But that's the type of test matches rugby is these days. They're tight games. The brutal players are really wanting to win. There's some amazing skills involved. So that's the stuff I've been involved in, which has been super exciting.
Talk to that game, the Australia-South Africa game. I know Australia, gave SA a bit of a tickle up in that first test. So did you, knowing that, did you know in your prep for the game, were you thinking, wow, this could be pretty ferocious, I'm expecting a bit of a reaction from South Africa, or you just go in and ref what's in front of you, and because I know when I talked to you a little bit about that match, you sort of came off the field going, wow, that was pretty ferocious, there was a huge amount to have to work through there as a referee, and you sort of came off the field wondering, like how did I go? That was pretty intense. Like, firstly, talk about the lead up, like knowing with South Africa dropping that first Test match, whether that affects your preparation or not at all, and then talk about the aftermath.
Yeah, I think like as a referee, what you do is you try and go into a game without any preconceived ideas, no bias. You referee, your style of game, your blueprint. That's how you can be consistent in the game. But what was different this year is that normally in rugby championship previously, teams they wouldn't play each other week after week.
Yep.
So in this round that week, Australia played South Africa in Adelaide, and then they played the same game in Sydney the week after. So it was almost like a mini series. So all the, whatever happens in that first part of the series, all the built-up tension, who tackled who scored on who won, does get carried over to the next game. So you'd be silly as a referee not to just understand that, okay, there is a little bit of history there from the week before. So I understood that. Any Australia-South Africa test match, albeit any test match, but especially those two, are going to be spicy. They love
a bit of feeling there, eh? There's a bit of feeling there between those two teams.
There's a lot of love. There's a lot of love and a lot of big hits and really good game of rugby. So I did have that understanding that, okay, look, we need to be in control of what's going on in the game, especially with the week before we had Marika Koroibete tackle in the corner. We had a yellow card against Faf de Klerk. So there was a lot of history there going into this game. So yeah, we had that. And then when we went into the 80 minutes, I walked off the field. And I felt like I was in the game the whole time. I was constantly thinking, constantly working really hard. Had to have my ARs helping me, my TMO as well. And I walked off the game thinking, obviously we go through a big review process with our coaches and our review staff, and I just wasn't sure how they were gonna take it, because it was a tough game. I think throughout the whole game I was constantly at crossroads of, okay, I can go down this path with this decision. I can go down this path and make this type of decision. And there were about multiple times throughout the game, especially the last big push and shove at the end. Do I yellow card the South African winger, or do I yellow card Eben Etzebeth and Alan Alatoa for their push and shove, or do I yellow card all of them? So in that moment, there's 3 or 4 different decisions that I can make. Which, okay, in that moment you feel and use your experience to try and make what you think is the best decision for the game. But in hindsight, when you review a game, when you look at different angles, it can always be different, and the outcomes can always be different as well. So yeah, look, I think you're always nervous after test matches now, because you're just not sure how it's going to be perceived. You can come off and you're happy that, well, I did the best I could, and I did the best what I felt for the game. But certainly, you learn a lot in review. Fortunately, though, they were pretty happy, my bosses. Obviously, they thought there were 1 or 2 things that you could do differently, and you learn from that. But yeah, they're always tough. So I found that over the last 2 years, especially leading into this next World Cup, referees, you just you're doing the best that you can. And a lot of the referees are doing a great job. And then you're coming off the game and thinking, okay, well, let's see how that's reviewed, and then hopefully you get the tick box. But sometimes you don't.
Was that uncertainty though? Does that come from the fact that you thought you were in the game a bit? Like, your desire really is to not be in the game too much. You want to let it flow. You want to let the team sort out, the match between them. But when you have to step in and adjudicate certain things and feel like maybe you're slowing down the game, or maybe you're in the game a bit, is that where that uncertainty comes from? Because actually your desire when you walk on the field is just to go out there and try and let this baby flow and let the guys go at it. Yeah,
well, a referee's job, you want to just be able to set guidelines. So set guidelines that will allow the players to showcase their talents. Okay, and that's what you got to do. Because if you don't set those guidelines, teams are good enough and they push the edge enough that it'll be free for all. But you don't want to close it up so that teams can't do that and teams can't play. So that's the balance you want to make. But I think when a referee, you're constantly making decisions either that everyone sees because you're blowing the whistle, or you're constantly making decisions not to blow your whistle. So that's what you're having to deal with for the 80 minutes. So it's not often always what people see, because in your head, actually, you're working out a lot more stuff. Did that player, when they went off their feet, is that a penalty? Did they affect the nine's delivery to the first 5? Is that consistent with how I've refereed in the first 10 minutes? So they're all stuff that you're thinking as a referee. And sometimes you quickly get into that seat and that feel really easily, and then the game does flow. But then sometimes, what I'd say in that South Africa Australia game is that, you're constantly just having to stay in it, whether you're making decisions or not making decisions, for the full 80 minutes. So you have a chat with your assistant referees at halftime. Okay, guys, this is what we had in the first 40. What do we need to do to change for the next 40? And, it might be, okay, we need to stand more on the D line, offsides, space is a bit tight. We need to hold the kickers and the players that are chasing through so that there's a better counter-attack because players are moving forward in the line. So you're constantly working. And I think just the game's changed now where, referees, you're having to think and work a lot harder now. And when you do your review, you find out when you were correct, and also you find out the non-decisions, so the decisions that you should have made, and also the ones where you get them wrong.
Mate, and what does that look like? So you do that game, you come off the field, does the teams that you've just refereed have the opportunity to challenge anything post the game? And when do you do your review with your bosses, with, Craig Joubert or someone like that? And then when does that all finish so you can flush all that and carry on to the next one? Like, what does it look like post a test match? Because so often the referees' decisions are a massive talking point in the game we've just watched on the weekend.
Yeah, that's the beauty of test matches right now. And I think the beauty of the passion for the game is that people are always talking about a game of rugby. And, it is just down to get the decisions that a referee makes, because it's the difference between one team winning, one team losing, a player being yellow or red carded. And I do love that. I do love the talking points that it creates. So what we do after a game, so we've got bosses. So Joel Jute, you see Craig Joubert, Tony Spreadbury, Bryce Lawrence. So one will be allocated to be our reviewer for that game. So they'll watch the game in detail. And then as a group, they will discuss that together. So they'll go through their playlist. They'll clip times in the games where there's a decision that I got right or wrong. They'll say whether it was right, the reasons they thought it was wrong, or a decision that they thought that needed to be made in the game. They'll then comment on any high impact decisions, so tries that were awarded or disallowed, so through the TMO or yellow or red cards that were given or missed as well. So they'll set up their playlist. I'll do my full review on a Sunday or a Monday as well, and I'll look at my accuracy and I'll do the same thing. So when we get together on a Tuesday with my assessor, we hopefully have the clips aligned, and whether I've had a good game or a bad game or had some errors in it, we should be in the same ballpark. So if we are, then great. Okay, my review is pretty good, your review as well, and then we can discuss the game. If we're way off, like if we're off the mark with each other, then that's when we have an issue.
Yep.
But we're generally pretty honest in our reviews now, so we are pretty much aligned. And then once that's done, so that's the full review done, it's fully discussed, we discuss as a full group of referees the games over the weekend. And then the actual team coaches, they send through their clips as well. So, for example, South Africa, I think they sent through about 15 to 20 clips. Australia sent through about 10 minutes worth of clips. So, and it's all really good. So a lot of it is technical stuff around, okay, should this have been a penalty? Should this not have been a penalty? But also trend detail as well, because they're then leading, they're going to straight into play, the All Blacks or straight into Argentina. So they want to get a referee's viewpoint around, some of the detail of what they're doing right or wrong too. So I think I've enjoyed the collaboration there is around the game between our assessors and the team coaches. I know we meet up with the coaches before the game as well, and I think it's really important for us to keep understanding that game and not drifting off in that bubble that referees we can if we get off sidetracked down those train tracks.
Semi-final football this weekend. You've got Canterbury versus Bay of Plenty. Have you enjoyed getting back to the domestic game, seeing some of our local talent? Is there differences in style, how you prepare for a game, etc.? Like, I know there's a few less cameras, Ben, to put you under the microscope. That's certainly one difference in the NPC versus international, isn't it? But do you really look forward to those matches?
Oh, I love the NPC. It's a lot of fun. You do get a little bit nervous when you're warming up and you're looking down the sideline and you see that there's no cameras down there. It means you got to work harder. You got to get in goal because the TMO, without 24 angles, 24 cameras, it doesn't really help. So that does make you a little bit nervous. But what I've loved is that we have such a wide pool of talent within New Zealand, and we're seeing that come through with new players. We saw that in the Waikato Bay of Plenty game last weekend, where players are breaking through the middle, new names are scoring tries on the wing. And, it's just exciting rugby. And I especially liked round 9, which was the last round of NBC, where I think, 6 or 7 teams, it would have been more, could have made the quarterfinals. And it all came down to, the last game. And because teams needed to get points and score tries, instead of taking the 3 points, they were kicking to the corner. So, Canterbury versus Otago. And I really enjoyed that game. It was one of those ones, like we said before, set the guidelines. So I set those guidelines and then the players just played. And, we got down to the last minute of the game where, either team was in position to be able to win it and go through to the quarterfinal. So it's a great competition. And I think New Zealand rugby's in a good place because whilst a lot of the All Blacks haven't been able to play, we've seen a lot of new talent coming through. young talent that it keeps us on our toes as referees. But I think it's going to cause some international teams some problems in a few years when those players come through.
Mate, have you got your schedule? Have you been appointed some matches for the Northern Tours, for the Northern Hemisphere matches, because you're part of the international panel? Do you know what you'll be doing towards the end of the year?
Yeah, I do. So Round 8 actually just came out last week. So part of the review process that happens after a window, and I call like the Rugby Championships a window, the July Test Series was a window, and Six Nations. So those bosses that I talked about before, they sit down and they look through all the games in November and they select referees for those games, and they sort of pick based on performances in previous windows and what they're thinking now for Rugby World Cup. So Rugby World Cup's next year. They're going to be selecting their World Cup referees in about March next year. So they're thinking, okay, we're taking about 12 referees. Who are those 12 referees? And are there more referees that we need to actually keep looking at and give experience to? So that's what they'll do over in November, and obviously for Six Nations as well. So so I head over in about 3 weeks and heading to France first. I'm going to run touch for Jaco Piper. He's going to referee France versus Australia at Stade de France. So that's going to be epic. And then I head on down to Cardiff at Principality Stadium. I'll referee Wales versus Argentina. Nice. It's a really good game. It's awesome atmosphere at that stadium. And then the last round, I'll referee, go to Dublin and referee at Aviva Stadium, and I'll do Ireland versus Australia. And that'll be just a massive game too. So some big games coming up and some big test matches, and you sort of just you finish one window, and you sort of catch your breath, and then you go into these two more big games as well.
Mate, and I think that's a point you touched on there a little bit. So often, I think the fans or the rugby community, don't see refs as accountable as perhaps players and coaches. Like that. There's always a bit of that view, but like 100%, like you're trying to perform to be picked for these pinnacle events, and at the moment, the World Cup's the one on our horizon, isn't it? And you want to go up north and show that you can referee in all different parts of the world, all different teams playing each other, all different styles. So you can chuck your name in the hat to go to what is, I have no doubt, the ultimate goal for a referee, to go and referee at the World Cup, and hopefully you can't ref a final because that means New Zealand's not in it, but to referee the highest possible games at those tournaments.
Yeah, look, I just love being involved in those top games because I find them challenging, and I like to come through those challenges and learn. And it is so. Players wanting to go to World Cup and referees are as well, and it's a bit of a double-edged sword because while we're trying to, we want the best flowing game. We want the game to be all about obviously the players, but also because we want to be able to go to World Cup, we want to be accurate so that when we have these review sessions with our coaches, we don't want to be sitting at low accuracy, even though there's 25 tries in the game and everyone was loving the game. So that's that balance we're trying to work at is with refereeing is, okay, where is that middle point? And I think there's definitely accountability for referees. Now, while it might not be public, but if you read between the lines, you look at appointments, referees don't always get the tier 1 versus tier 1 games. Some windows they actually referee that they might referee a tier 2 versus tier 2 country, which is still challenging in itself. So there is a bit of a rotation there, and there is definitely accountability around those performances. But a lot of referees, they're just want to be in a position where they are being selected for that pinnacle event. And mate, I've always said, I've probably said to you as well, Randy, that my 100% goal is to be having a beer in the final watching the All Blacks at that World Cup next year. So if I can do that and referee some games there, I'll be super happy, and that will be a great goal to achieve. It's some exciting rugby coming up in the next few months.
Mate, let's talk about some of the big moments in the game. And there's plenty of them, but we'll pick a few out. And probably most recently, let's talk a little bit about, the Bledisloe in Melbourne, where massive call that basically took up 95% of the coverage post the match. What were your thoughts on that? And also just, talk us a little bit around, that process and what where we got to post that match around that decision.
Yeah, look, obviously, massive decision. And 1 minute to go. It was an amazing test match. That Bledisloe was unreal, and it's quite funny. Constantly, I think there's always jokes that players say to referees. I think I can't count the amount of times now that in games that people have been saying time wasting to me and getting them to speed up the game. So I think what the referee did in that situation is really just showcase that we need to actually sort the game out and actually improve time wasting so that players moving the game along. And if for anything, whether the referee was right or wrong, if for anything, it's now become a topic that players are aware of. And I think good luck to anyone that tries to do the same thing in a big Test match in a quarterfinal or a semi-final or a World Cup next year. But look, in that situation, and I think it's fine to be able to talk about it now, because as a referee in those moments, you make decisions based on what you feel is best in that moment, but also what influences you throughout the game.
Yeah.
What I don't think a lot of people realise is that there was a little bit of a running battle between the referee, and the Wallabies first five throughout the game in terms of wanting to speed up the game, or stop at the kick. I want to review something, and then the ball's kicked over the referee's head. So there was a bit of that was sort of probably influencing that final decision. So while the decision, and this is what everyone asked me, while the decision was correct under law, I think there's a lot of situations in a game where there is the law book and there is actually how you best manage it. And I think what World Rugby's come out and said afterwards is that, look, we understand and we support that technically you're correct in making that decision to turn the ball over because of time wasting. But in the future, if we have situations like this again, to all the referees, let's think of ways which are going to be a little bit less spotlight on us, that you can actually manage that situation. So whether that's actually just calling time off and saying, look, I'm not going to actually put time back on until you kick the ball, until you go to the line out, or actually not saying anything at all and understanding that we're given a penalty. The Wallabies deserve to kick to touch and have a line out. So there's all these different situations. So there's a spectrum of what we can decide on. Right here at the end is turnover scrum, and right here at the end is doing nothing. So I think what it allowed us to understand is that, okay, we know those are the two decisions. What else can we do in the middle if we get that situation in the game again? So that was the big learning for us.
It's great to hear you discuss sort of, I don't know, for lack of a better term, feel of the game with the bosses as well, and that's a component when you're doing your reviews. I want to talk to another one where we stiff the Aussies. Sam Whitelock try at Eden Park. What were your thoughts on that? I know it was one. I was actually in the crowd for that one, so it was really hard to kind of really have an opinion, because it's such a different experience when you're live at the game compared to when you're watching on TV. But what were your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, look, it's a tough one. That was a complicated one if you're just looking at it based on what the referee's trying to see. But the important thing was the question that the referee gave to the TMO, and this is the one thing that I want to get out there, is that we have systems and I guess safety nets in place with the TMO around foul play and around grounding, so that it makes it easier for the TMO and actually rewards the attacking team, or for better useful word, the team that's scoring a try. So in that situation, what the referee's done is that the referee's seen a grounding. So if the referee sees a grounding, the on-field decision, if it's leading to a try, will always be the on-field decision is try.
Yeah. But
I just want to check, what was going on. So if the on-field decision is try, there must be clear and obvious or clear evidence that the try is not correct for the team overall, if that makes sense. So in that situation, so the referee's seen Sam Whitelock, he's seen his hand on the ball, and he's seen the ball grounded. So he must have seen those two things. He's then asked for the TMO to have a look at it and said that the on-field decision is try. Yeah. Now, in that whole situation, when we looked at it, yes, I think Angus Bell definitely gets his hand on the ball, but there's no clear evidence of the ball separating from Sam Whitelock's hand, and that's something that the referee saw. He saw that Sam Whitelock never took his hand off the ball, and he saw the ball was grounded. So really, in that situation, all you need to do is look at 3 or 4 angles, and then if those 3 or 4 angles don't show clear separation, they don't show a clear knock-on, then the answer is try. So even though it was really difficult, and we probably looked at the angles, too many times, maybe that created a little bit more confusion. Because the on-field decision was try, then it's always going to be a try. Now the difference would be if the referee didn't see the ball grounded, your on-field decision would be no try, and therefore it would actually be really hard to overrule that side as well. So it's really important that the live decision is correct by the referee. So by saying the on-field decision was try, the on-field referee is saying that, look, I have seen the ball grounded, I have seen the ball in Sam Whitelock's hand. Yes, Angus Bell does touch the ball as well, but because you can't prove that there is clear separation, we rule the try and we move on. So bit of background there for you.
Totally. I want to go to the other end of the spectrum a little bit and talk about the last rugby championship match between Argentina and South Africa, which had a huge amount of penalties, and get your thoughts on, and that caused a bit of discussion as well. Two very abrasive teams. Thoughts on that and the amount of penalties given?
Yeah, look, as we go into a game, referee, we never have in our mind what's the ideal number of penalties in a game. We don't try and referee to a magic number.
Yep.
Some games you'll referee and you may only have 12 penalties in the game. Some games like this one, and yes, it is rare. There was 39 penalties and 6 yellow cards. So, a lot of penalties, almost one every 2 minutes. So that is a lot higher than probably what we've seen. But if we look back at throughout the Rugby Championship, I had 26 penalties in my game. I think the week after we had 31, 32 in the previous Argentina South Africa game as well. So, that I guess 39 is not too far off from being inconsistent with the weeks before. And if we look through that game, so yes, there are always decisions that we make as a referee that are incorrect, okay? There's also decisions that we miss. So potentially that game could have had 45 penalties.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, that does sound a little bit outrageous. And I guess, you don't want, people don't turn up to hear the referee blow their whistle constantly, but they want to watch a fair game of rugby. And what I liked about what the referee did in that game is that he made his decisions. And then after about 4 or 5, or if any of them repeated, he went to both captains or separately to captains and clearly warned them about what the referee was saying and around what the penalties were for. And if the behaviour didn't change, then, the outcome or the consequence of that's going to be a yellow card. So when the referee stuck to his guns and continued to penalise them and the players didn't change their behaviour, then, what do we get? We got multiple yellow cards in the game. And that's why the referee and the captain relationship is really important, because teams, especially at the elite level, have to be able to adapt to what the referee is doing on the day. They have to be able to understand, okay, this is the picture that the referee is seeing. Whether the referee is right or wrong, if we want to win this game, we've got to adapt. And the team that adapts the fastest is going to win that game. And in that game, what we saw is that, the referee gave the captain the opportunity to understand what the issues were. So, for example, I think in the game, there's a bit of offside, there's a bit of slowing it down at the ruck. And then it's up to the captain to actually tell the players to change their behaviour, to maybe stop jacking for the ball or just choose your moments better. Or even right up to the coach. The coach has heard the warning as well. So if there's a player that's been penalised a lot, they might have to pull that player off for that game, because that's just what the referee is saying. So therefore, like a lot of referees, sometimes when we're challenged, sometimes we actually back off. And then it becomes a bit of a free-for-all because we don't want to get that penalty count too high. So I understood what the referee did in that moment. And look, to his credit, stuck to his guns, kept penalising them, kept warning them, gave them a yellow card. They didn't change, kept penalising them, warned them again, then another yellow card, and we get to a 39 penalty kick game. And I think I looked at the review in that game, and his accuracy was about 92%. So that's pretty high, and did a pretty good job. So yeah, a bit of an outlier in terms of the number of penalties. It was a good learning for all of us, but also I think a good learning for players that both teams just have to adapt with the referee on the day.
Some days they're just like that, eh? Some days teams just want to get in there and niggle each other, and it doesn't matter what the ref does. It's maybe not going to change behaviour.
It's niggle, but also, I mean, there are a lot of unlucky penalties in that game as well, where a player knocks on and then someone that's offside, it falls in the breadbasket, so that's a penalty. So there's a lot of sort of unusual penalties like that as well. So when you see that as a referee, just thinking, oh, yeah, that's another one, but I've got to give it. So
talk a little bit as well around the rules and try and help our listeners a little bit to understand, some of the things they see on TV. One that caused a huge amount of discussion was in the second and the third test of the All Blacks versus Ireland around head contact. 2 big cards around head contact. One, you could argue certainly from my perspective, similar-ish, but given different outcomes. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Because I know that's all been through review now and is out there.
Yeah, it's head contact process or head collisions in the game obviously is a big talking point with potential lawsuits that are happening up in the UK and injuries that are happening to players as well with concussion. So World Rugby's got a big aspect of trying to protect players and safety in the game, which I really credit. I think it's really valuable for us. So what the bosses have tried to arrange or understand is, okay, how do we allow the game to continue in its dynamic way that players play, but also how do we protect the players around the tackle technique. So the head contact process was brought in. I think it's been there for about just over a year now, and it allows us to referee and try and get some consistency between games, so that we can decide whether a player is making a tackle. Do they cause foul play, and is that foul play something we need to sanction? So the head contact process has 4 questions to it. The first question is there head contact? Yes or no? So that's quite easy. The second one, is it due to foul play? And then the third and fourth is what is the degree of danger and is there any mitigation involved? So any type of head contact that happens in a game of rugby, we'll have the referee looking at it live, but also the TMO in the background, rewinding and looking at that process. And there is a lot of head contact process in a game. So players enter a ruck, players make a low tackle. There may be head contact, and that's the first answer. So do we say yes or no to that? If we say yes, the second question is it due to foul play? So a lot of that is based on the tackler. So
what does that mean? What does foul play mean in that context here?
Yep. So what we expect the tackler to do is like we're taught when we grew up playing rugby, is that you need to bend at the hips. Okay. You need to have both hands up. You need to be wrapping with your arms. So if a tackler makes head contact, but is bent at the hips, is low to the ground, and is wrapping, that head contact is not due to foul play, okay, because there's nothing else that tackler could have done. If, however, the tackler is upright, okay, so they haven't bent at the hips or they haven't wrapped their arms, then the answer to that second question, is it due to foul play, is yes. Yeah. So now we're going down the process of, okay, we understand that it's foul play, so it's either going to be a red card, a yellow card, or a penalty. And that all comes down to the degree of danger. So that's the third question. So the degree of danger can either be extreme, middle, or low. And factors that come into that are they wrapping, or is it a direct shoulder charge? Are they running in from distance? Do they have full sight of the player the whole time they're trying to do that? So if they're running in from distance with speed, they're upright, and they click the player in the head, we're going to say that that is a high degree of danger, and potentially that's going to be a red card. Yeah, see you later. But then the last question is there any mitigation? So mitigation can be due to the ball carrier. And, is that ball carrier being tackled? So therefore there's a significant change in height dropping, or is there a significant change in height in terms of the step? Yeah. Now, this whole head contact process, those four questions, has been developing over time, right? So when we had the July incident with Angus Ta'avao, he was correctly given a red card based on that head contact process then. What we understood in the review, though, is that Angus Ta'avao, he was upright. But because there was a significant change in direction from the Irish player, he didn't actually have time to be able to dip. So it was more reaction. So we don't expect players, and this is what we learned, we don't expect players to run around bent at the hips just in case they get back on the inside. We learned in that situation that can be used as either mitigation because there was a significant change in direction. Angus Ta'avao didn't have time to drop. What we would do is actually potentially bring that down from a red to a yellow, because we did have head contact. It was foul play because Angus was upright. Yep. There was a degree of danger because there was direct contact and was with speed. But the mitigation is because Angus Ta'avao didn't have time to actually bend at the hips because of the significant change in direction of the Irish player coming back in. So that was the really good learning there. And then we had the Andrew Porter incident the week after, where it was a little bit different because potentially, what the referee did in that scenario is that there was no mitigation from Brodie Retallick dipping, but the degree of danger was a lot lower. That's what the referee saw at the time, because the player, Andrew Porter, wasn't running out of the line, did have a clear line of sight, but he thought that the danger was low. In review, however, what they've said is that, Andrew Porter was actually coming in and actually sort of launched into the tackle. So in review thought that actually could have been a red card. So a lot of it is changing. It's dynamic. We're trying to get to a point where we get to the World Cup next year and all these little changes have already happened, so that we have a really solid system, a really solid framework, so that when a referee describes it, almost the whole public understands it and they can come along for the ride as well. So what July showed is that we're not really there yet. Okay, we're still getting there. But what I like is that, look, we've got another 8 months of rugby. And I feel like we are getting more consistent. We are getting closer to those right decisions. Even though July we had some good learnings, I think Rugby Championship was a lot better, and I think November will be a lot better as well. And I've seen when we get together as a group of referees, we go through all the World Rugby referees. We go through about 40 or 50 clips of foul play from all over the world, and we use was it Kahoot?
Play a game.
I think 2 years ago there was a massive spread around where the consistency was. Where now we're really tight around what people think's a red card, what people think's a yellow card or play on. So it's getting there. It's really getting there, and I think July just showed, and it allowed us to be able to adapt it better.
I really like that. I like how you stepped us through the 4 stages, which you can almost see the referee doing on the field when they're going through that decision. They almost talk through those different stages, don't they, and do that with the TMO and try and come to the right outcome. I think you're right, mate. It's not early days, but it's very much a journey, and I think overall there is getting some more consistency into that side of things, because the reality is we want to protect the head, don't we? We don't want people going off with concussions or knockouts. That's the last thing we want to see, and they're such big units these days. Mate, we're going to leave it there because we've blown through 40 minutes as we do. We want to get you on regularly. I think another great opportunity will be when you get back from Northern Hemisphere tour, see what you've seen up there. Like, it'll be really, really interesting to dig into, whether it was the style of the game or how you had to referee those games is going to be any different, because some of those are crackers. Like Ireland are red hot at the moment. They're playing Aussie. In Dublin, that'll be amazing. Principality Stadium, like, that'll be amazing. Like, it'll be fantastic to talk to you and get back with that. So thank you so much, mate, for joining us. Good luck on the weekend. That'll be a cracking game as well, and perhaps we'll see you blowing the whistle in the final as well. Appreciate it, mate.
Thanks, Ronnie. Awesome. Cheers.
The All Blacks podcast is powered by our official cloud software partner, SAP, helping our teams in black be the best run in sports. Hosted by Rob Dunn in the Hargrave Street studio. Produced by Carl Thompson from Blue and Ginge, the podcast producers. Video editing by Mac Leesburg, graphics by Western Design, content advising from Andy Burt, and commercial manager for the podcast is Valeska Hoth. Follow the All Blacks podcast on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, and anywhere you get your podcasts.